Welcome back to the news today. This is One on One. In the last months, the situation in Iraq became more and more complicated. The Kurdish autonomous area in northern Iraq was once considered relatively safe, but is now under threat from ISIS militants and needs outside military aids to confront this threat. With me now is Dr. Moti Zaken, an expert on the Kurds and their connection to Israel. Good evening. Thank you very much for coming. So how come the Kurds need right now the help of all the world to help them fight the ISIS?
Well, it's a good question. The Kurds, actually, up until a while ago, they're the most stable component in Iraq. They had practically everything. It was a state without being considered state legally, de facto, not de jure. And they have administration, they have offices, they have transportation, they have airports, they have everything. And they were very close to announcing their independence. This is why it's very tragic. And it happens because I think the ISIS, the Daesh, I think it went under the radar of everybody because originally they were fighting in Syria. And this is why, for example, Qatar and Turkey supported them to fight in Syria. Nobody expected them to be such a caliphate which has global
Nobody expected that it will explode in their faces in one way or another. But can the Kurds actually win this? Can the Kurds actually fight the ISIS? Because it seems that right now the Kurds are fighting on behalf of the entire world, the battle that the world should fight for them as well.
Yes, well, the Kurds, actually, the last battle they had was in the early 90s. They lost to Saddam Hussein. That was the last challenge. And since then, since 1991, they never really had a serious challenge. And now they're facing the challenge. They need equipment. They have a good army, the Peshmerga. You know, Peshmerga, it means those who face death. Those who are willing to go and face death for their leaders, for their country, for their state. However,
in one way or another, we can compare it to jihadists.
No, they were actually, if you want, it's not the right time, but they are coming from a Sufi tradition or following their murid or their murshid. They were murids, disciples of the murshid, of the sheikh. And they were willing to follow him and support him. But this is a long story about the Kurds, the Kurdish nationality. Anyhow, the Peshmerga are very strong component, very committed, but they're not very well equipped. And this is why now the Germany, maybe France, and the United States lately are beginning to equip them and to give them some support.
You know, you're talking about they need to be armed, and we saw this situation happening also in Syria. We saw the situation when everybody armed the rebels in Syria, and then nobody started knowing who is right and who is wrong in this battle. Yes. Can this situation also explode in the Western faces? Can this situation also explode in the United States face? And the United States will have to face not only the ISIS, but the Peshmerga that will be also militants and will become to be a terror organization as well.
Well, no, it's actually here much more clear-cut situation than in Syria. In Syria, really everybody were puzzled, were surprised when they didn't really know where the rebels are going, and the rebels are people who were coming from all over the Arab world or the Islamic world, all kind of fanatic who the Islamic call was really touched upon them, touched their heart, and people went from all over the world and to join the army as a jihadist. In Kurdistan, as I said, the Peshmerga, there is a solid army, there is solid institution. In Kurdistan, there is almost a state. And I don't think that it's going to be. It's one of the most stable organization in the Middle East, and we should support them. When I say we, I mean the international community, not only Israel. And I think if they would be given support by America, by European countries, they will manage. And because, as you say, they are fighting everybody's war. The Daesh or the ISIS are really proclaiming caliphate and are posing major danger for the Muslims and for the minorities in Iraq. You know, Iraq has only 3% minorities.
You know, one of the most amazing things that you just said, it was almost a state. It is almost a country.
Yes.
It is almost. How come it's only almost? How come it didn't happen? How come, because it's so stable, it didn't happen?
Because Kurdistan doesn't, Iraqi Kurdistan, or the KRG, the Kurdish Regional Government, doesn't have a harbor, doesn't have a sea. So they need the cooperation of the surrounding countries. Turkey, Iraq, Iran and Syria. It's a very difficult situation. So finally they managed to come to terms with Turkey. Now they are exporting oil through Turkey, and they need always the recognition, the approval of the international community. And America, United States, was quite hesitant about it, whether to recognize them, whether to give them support. And this is why they were talking about proclaiming a state, but didn't do it because you know, it's a minority which suffered quite a lot in the Middle East.
But someone who did give them some kind of support is Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu in one way or another.
Vocally, verbally he said, we will support. That was very nice of him because he said we will support. He didn't mean we are going to extend military help. And he was actually the first leader who said it, and I was expecting that other leaders would come and say, well, the Kurds, it's the biggest minority in the Middle East, Muslims, non-Arabs indeed, but Muslims, 40 million people, they deserve to have a state. And let me tell you something about Kurdistan. Kurdistan is, in a way, almost like Israel, because all the Kurds, all the refugees from Kurdistan, Irani Kurdistan, Syria Kurdistan, from the exile, find shelter in Kurdistan, in Iraqi Kurdistan itself. So they really they deserve a state. They deserve, and I hope they will manage to come out of this crisis.
What is the special connection that Israel has with Kurdistan?
Well, Israel helped the Kurds in the 60s and during the 70s of the previous century, together with Iran, but not this current Iran, but Iran of the Shah.
The Shah.
And also with the cooperation of the United States of America. Unfortunately, they were betrayed, the Kurds, not by Israel, but by the Americans. They are, up until now, they remember very badly how they were betrayed when the Americans, Henry Kissinger, then made a contract or a term between Iran and Iraq, and therefore he said the contract was in Algiers. It's called the Algiers Agreement, and he said the contract said that actually the Kurds are not going to be supported anymore, and it gave a sign for the fall of the major rebellion of the Kurds, and they didn't really manage to surmount this situation. Many of them were killed, many were ran away. So Israel helped them, as you said, militarily, tactically. Kurdish leaders came here to visit, and actually a connection was made also with the Israelis who once used to live in Kurdistan, with Jews of Kurdistan. So it's a very fascinating story, because actually in Kurdistan there were good relations between Muslim and Jews, and they managed to bring it into the coalition, into the contact with Israel. And actually, the Kurds were willing to believe Israel and to go for a treaty with Israel because of the old, ancient relation between Kurds and Jews in Kurdistan.
Professor Zaken, Moti Zaken, Dr. Moti Zaken, thank you very, very much for this very interesting talk. Thank you very much for coming to our studio, and thank you, our viewers. That's it for tonight, the news today. 90 minutes of complete and utter news. We're going to be here yet again, tomorrow at the same time, same place from the Jaffa Port, Israel. Have a great night.